Okay. Hello, good morning. Just make sure, can everyone hear me? Yes, good. Very good. Okay, so today we are going to complete, try to complete our discussion of personal identity and the self. So where did we leave off last time? Well, right about here. Let's go back one slide just for recap purposes. So, we're talking about personal identity. What makes you um, the individual person that you are? That's not the only way to think of identity. Remember, last time we sort of gave an overview of a few different ways of thinking about identity that Crumley covers at the start of the chapter. So, of course, there's qualitative identity. Uh, where two entities share the exact same qualities. They are two separate individuals, but they're identical in that they are the same. Uh, right? So, Crumley's example is two newly minted coins, right? No scuff, no wear and tear yet, and they have exactly the same physical properties. So those are qualitatively identical. Um, that's a little bit different from numerical identity, right? Numerical identity is when you are the very same entity as, well, you. Here, X and Y are the same entity. There's only one of you. That's what makes you you. There's individual identity, which is whatever the sort of important nature of the individual is that individuates it from all of the other individuals. And there's personhood identity, which is a little different than personnel identity. Uh, Personhood identity is what makes you a person. Now, these might overlap, right? So um, keep that in mind as we move forward. We summarized a number of different approaches to understanding the nature of individuals. Oh, hello, sir. Um, uh, but rather than summarize these, let's just get to the memory criterion, which is due to John Locke. Well, individual identity is what makes an individual the individual that they are. So, what makes me different from you? Lots of things, presumably, right? Like um, I have a different body. I have a different set of memories, um, different life experiences, and so forth. Um, those individuate us. Those are just some of the things that individuate us, that make us different from one another. Or to use the cats, right? What individuates this fellow from, it's a little washed out on the screen here, but what individuates this fellow from his brother who is hiding upstairs somewhere? Physical characteristics such as the color of his fur, the type of fur, short as opposed to long, um, uh, certain what we'll call personality traits. This fellow is quite chipper. The other one is grumpy, right? And these um, individuate these individual cats. And indeed, their traits individuate them from other members of their kind. So that's individual identity. Does that clear it up? Personhood identity is about what makes you a person, as opposed to something else, like, um, not a person. Like if I lost all my mental faculties and I was just Yeah, it could be mental, but it doesn't have to be. So if I lost all of my memories and all of my cognitive functions and became some kind of vegetable, would I still be considered a person? Some would say yes, and some would say no. Or maybe it's my DNA. I have human, it doesn't have to be mental, right? Like I have human DNA. Maybe that's what constitutes me being a person. If I had different DNA, I'd be some kind of animal which we might not consider a person, right? So let's take a look at the psychological view now, which again is due to John Locke, right? What makes you the person that you are? So personal identity here is personal identity here is very much is very similar to how I described individual identity on the previous slide. What makes you the person you are, what identifies you as you, is your chain of remembered experiences. Now, Locke often talks about this in terms of consciousness, but he means memory. And so we call this the memory criterion of personal identity. Locke, it's important to point out, is also really focused on numerical identity. So, what is it that makes you over time, even though various changes occur to you? Kind of like the ship of Theseus, if you remember that, right? If you if you think that it's the same ship, even after all the parts have been replaced, well, what is it that makes it the same ship over time then, if it's made of different stuff? Um, maybe you would say something like, well, it's the form of the ship. Locke would say what makes you the same person that you are now as you were in the past, despite all the changes you've undergone, is your chain of remembered experiences. So that makes me at this moment in time and at previous moments in time, the same individual. And my unique chain of remembered experiences is what makes me me and not you. Well, when did I introduce these questions? Ah, right. So each of these issues that we've just been grappling with have particular names, right? We can think of the first kind of issue as a persistence question, right? What makes you the same individual over time, despite all of the changes that might occur to you and that do occur to you? That's a persistence question. An individuation question is more about, what individuates you from others. Excuse me, sir, could you come over here? Just won't leave me alone today. Oh. So, what is it that makes you you in each case? Again, a chain of remembered experiences. And you can imagine some scenario, kind of like a Freaky Friday situation, right? Where maybe I switch bodies with somebody for some reason. I forget why they switch in the movie. Anybody seen it? Can anyone remind us of why uh, Lindsay Lohan's character and Jamie Lee Curtis's character switch? Is it one of those wish situations? I don't remember. A fortune. Ah, of course, a fortune cookie. Okay, so I eat yo-yo. So I eat a magic fortune cookie and I switch bodies with somebody else. Okay. Locke would say that if I still have all of my memories, my chain of remembered experiences remains intact, then I'm me. even though I'm in some other body. But what about if I suffer from some kind of condition where I begin to lose my memories? So what if and I realize this is, kind of a dark turn from Freaky Friday, but, imagine that I'm suffering from some kind of Alzheimer's, right? Some kind of dementia. So if I lose a lot of my memories, there is a sense in which I'm arguably not the same person that I was before I began to lose my memories. Yeah, like the Notebook. That's right. Where he has to read from the notebook to get her to remember, and not only remember, I don't remember the characters' names, but not only remember who she is, but who the other guy is, her partner, right? So those just a couple of illustrative examples to illustrate the importance of the memory criterion for persistence and for individuation. What if I had the same memories of someone else? Locke might say that that makes me um, the same individual as that other person. Like, imagine if I had all the same memories of Achilles. So I remember everything Achilles remembers, from the Iliad. I remember, um, no, sorry, there's a couple of cats here. Whoa, hello, sir. See, here's a different individual, different characteristics. See, individuated from the previous cat. Um, so I'm Achilles. If I remember, um, going to Troy, I'm going with all of the Achaeans under King Agamemnon, and we're going to fight the Trojans and get Helen back. I remember having a fight with Hector and killing Hector. I remember getting shot in the heel by Paris as he escapes with Helen. And that, of course, spells my end. If I had all of those memories, then I would just be Achilles. you know. Likewise, Locke would say, if you could somehow alter my memories, like if you could copy I don't know, the brain patterns, the copy the configuration of all of someone else's neurons, and make my brain such that it was a copy of another brain, and I had all of those persons' memories, then I would be them. I would be like a duplicate of them, right? This is what Locke says. He says, for it being the same consciousness that makes a man be himself to himself. Personal identity depends on that only, whether it be annexed only to one individual substance or can be continued in a succession of several substances. So that's exactly what he means there by, whether it's one individual, if it's just me, what makes me me is that chain of remembered experiences. But continuation in a succession of several substances, we could imagine some kind of weird case where um, you are duplicated or your memories are duplicated, and that would be you. Of course, there's a problem then for numerical identity, and that is that now we're no longer talking about one single individual in these duplication problems. Um, I don't know exactly how they would react. Um, and of course, Locke is writing this excuse me, Locke is writing this at a time when, we don't know about um, DNA or things like that and their connection to behavior. So, um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what he would say about that. Like if we copied someone else's memories into my brain and into your brain, would we each react differently? I think Locke thinks that we would then just be two duplicates of that individual. Because our original memories, like it's probably important to stipulate that our original memories are overwritten, right? So, but then again, duplication problems are tricky. We'll get to duplication problems or fission cases. Um, anyway, Locke continues, for it is by the consciousness it has of its present thoughts and actions, this is a substance or a self, that the self, that it is the self to itself now, and will be the same self as far as the same consciousness can extend to actions past or to come. So it's not important that you have the same body, um, or even the fact that you have this individual soul or that individual soul. It's your memories that you have when you are conscious. What about when I lose consciousness, though? Do I stop existing? Here is where I often quote or paraphrase the philosopher Billie Eilish, who asked, when we fall asleep, where do we go? Think about it. Where do you go? Like, not your body, but the I, the ego, when you fall asleep. It seems like you just kind of cease to exist, right? I'm glad you enjoyed that one. So, but think about it, right? Um, you you fall asleep every night and you lose consciousness. Or think about like if you've ever undergone anesthetic, right? You're at the dentist, maybe you're getting your wisdom teeth out or something, and the dentist has you start counting down as he gives you I don't know what kind of gas it is, but right, you get anesthetized somehow. I've actually never been anesthetized, so I don't know what it's like. But I had a friend who, oh, it's wacky. Yeah, yeah. I had a friend who, when we were teenagers, um, he had to get his wisdom teeth out, and he was anesthetized for that. And I told him ahead of time, I was like, You got to tell me what it's like because that sounds really weird. Like, see if you can maintain your awareness somehow. I don't know why I told him he should do that. Hey, yeah, be aware of when they're pulling those teeth, sure. But in any case, he told me that it was super crazy because he just started counting back with the dentist, like, okay, count backwards from 10, 9, 8, and then the next thing he knew, he was awake and the surgery was over. It was like he just stopped existing for that time. So, Locke would actually say, yeah, you did kind of temporarily cease to exist. Um, and same thing happens when we go to sleep every night. We lose consciousness, and as long as we're in non-REM sleep, so we're not awake, but we're also not dreaming, then it's kind of like you pop out of existence for a little bit. So tell me what you think about that while I go get a tissue. It's these fall mornings. Oh, yeah. Okay, a few questions here. Uh, yeah, I mean, we know that it works on certain areas of the brain, but well, I mean, to be fair, there's a lot about the brain that we don't understand. I mean, why should we know that certain chemicals affect brain functions in certain ways because they're similar to um, endogenous chemicals, that is, chemicals that we already have in our brains. But yeah, why do those chemicals do the jobs that they do? We're still working all of that out. Yeah, I've heard that it's not restful like sleep. Well, the I is the me, the ego, right? Um, I do have a quick question about the medical self-declaration. Sorry, this is a direct message. It's not a good idea to send me a direct message about something that we're not talking about in class during class. But I do have a question just now in the chat from someone who can't find the medical self-declaration form. If you're sick, I don't know where this form is. If you're really sick, I'll probably just take you at your word. So just, don't worry about it. It's really more important for like the final exam and things like whoops, things like that. If you need an exam deferral. So I wouldn't worry about it if you need it for something coming up in class. Just to answer the person who sent that question. Okay, back to business. Yeah, Mariam says, I always feel kind of tired after aesthetic or anesthetic or any sort of sedative. Yeah, I guess so because you're not asleep. In the same, you're unconscious, but you're not sleeping. Sleep is a process where it's like a restorative process where your body and your mind kind of repair and refresh themselves. That's not the case with anesthetics. With anesthesia, you're just out, right? So that would explain why you don't feel rested. Okay, so Locke says you are essentially your chain of memories, your chain of remembered thoughts and experiences that you have when you're conscious. What happens if you forget something? I mean, we all forget things. I mean, I remain the same person. Many would counter. Look, Locke, I remain the same person, even though I've forgotten something important. And this is actually a criticism of Locke's view, right? Oh shoot, I can't remember the name. I think it's Thomas Reed who has the example of the brave general from your textbook. I don't have my textbook down here right now, but maybe someone can check this for me. But yeah, there's a um there's a young boy who, he does something like, I don't know, he steals something, he does something wrong. Then he remembers doing that. But sometime later he goes and becomes a soldier. Um yeah, right? Like that's a yeah, good example, Chloe. Like I forget the philosopher I'm talking about. Am I no longer me? So Reed says, I'm pretty sure it's Reed. Um, he says, uh, so this boy who, I don't know, did something wrong when he was young, grows up to be a brave soldier, and then the brave soldier gets even older and becomes a general, and the general remembers being the brave soldier, but not being the disobedient child. The soldier remembers being the child, but the general doesn't remember being the child. He just remembers being the soldier. But clearly, they're all the same individual, right? But maybe there just needs to be continuity. Maybe we could reply like, you know, even if I'm missing something, if I forget something important, there's still a chain of memories there. Maybe I don't remember that particular memory, but there's a different chain connecting other memories to different past memories. That's a possibility as well. So that's an early objection, but there are more science fiction kind of objections. One is called the fission objection, and it has to do with fission cases or duplication cases, which are exactly what they sound like, right? I mean, what if I was duplicated? Like, we'll talk about this in the next set of slides in more detail, but what if I was duplicated in some kind of like Star Trek transporter accident, right? Or what if, as Crumley says, I'm about to have my mind uploaded to a computer? Maybe because I'm near death, or because I'm about to undergo some kind of dangerous procedure. So, my doctor wants to make some copies of me in case something goes wrong. So he makes a couple copies. Everything goes fine, but now there are two of me because each of me has the exact same memories. So which one is me? Duplicate one or duplicate two? Yeah, that's right, Aiden. And you know what? Like I was going to mention that in the beginning of the next set of slides. Um, yeah, that was the episode Second Chances. And imagine that, like they had no idea that Riker was down on that planet for years, and that other Riker had no idea that. Well, I guess he thought that he had been abandoned. He didn't understand why he was left there, but he had no idea that they had a Riker on the Enterprise, right? Um, I think watching that episode in syndication when I was younger was probably the first time I had to think about personal identity in the self, which is kind of cool if you think about it. All right, I'm just going to refill my coffee. Yeah, that's right. There's Space Beth and well, I don't know, original Beth, right? And even Rick doesn't know which one's which. And of course, they're individuated after they are uh duplicated, right? One Beth stays on Earth and one goes to space to have adventures. And so they form different chains of memories subsequent to the duplication, right? So Locke would say, well, there are two different Beths. There's Earth Beth and Space Beth, right? So, sorry, one moment. More coffee. Comfortable couch. Oh, goodness. Okay. What are we saying in the chat? Yeah, well, it's like the dimes, the example of the dimes, right? Like for Remy and Chloe's comments, how Crumley says, if we're talking about qualitative identity, then as soon as those two coins are minted, they're qualitatively the same, but then they go out into circulation and maybe one gets snatched up early and put in a coin collection so it stays very nice, but another goes into circulation and gets all worn and scratched and stuff, and so now they're different. They're only the same at the moment of duplication, or in the case of the coins, at the moment that they're minted, right? So yeah, oh, um, well, yeah, like, yeah, well, no, Kale, it's a good question. Like Locke would say, past the point of duplication, once they start forming new memories and having new experiences, they are different people. But Bernard Williams here, he has a different answer. So, this is how he put the problem. It is logically possible that some other man should simultaneously undergo the same changes, etc., etc. What should we say in that case? They cannot both be the individual. Moreover, if they were both identical with the individual, they would be identical with each other, which is also absurd. Um, so if I have one individual who we call you, and I duplicate that individual, right? Like the scenario Crumley is describing is like, let's pretend it's me. So, um, I'm going to upload my mind to a computer for some reason. So the scientist is going to scan my brain and make some kind of copy of me, of my memories. But the procedure is risky, so he makes two copies of me. So now there's you, U1, and U2. So we're dealing with three entities here. But the procedure works, and you is uploaded to the computer and becomes U1. But now I also have U2. So who is identical to whom? Williams is saying, well, it's kind of absurd if you think about it. Like, um, U1 is identical with you, but U2 is also identical with both of them. So they're all the same individual, but clearly we're talking about three different individuals. Yeah. Right, essentially. How would we determine? I don't know. Yeah, rock, paper, scissors, drawing straws. Well, it depends, right? What are we going to do with the extra individual? Roderick Chisholm actually thought that the original, the U, is identical to one of U1 or U2, but we can't tell which one. Kind of like Rick and Morty with Space Beth. Yeah. Yeah, the Spider-Man meme, basically, right? Yeah, you're right. Where they're all like pointing. Um, so yeah, in that Rick and Morty episode that I forget who it was, but so um you have Beth, who's you, and then a duplicate is made of Beth, but Rick doesn't know which one is the clone. Beth doesn't know which one is the clone. Nobody knows which one the clone is. So that's kind of like what Chris Holm is saying. Like, the original is identical to one of the duplicates, but we don't know which one. Maybe it was original Beth who then went off to be Space Beth and the clone stayed on Earth. Or maybe it was the other way around. We don't know. But we know that one of them is identical to the original. You could disagree with that, though. You could say maybe, getting back to my case, right? When the mad scientist copied my brain and made two copies, one of which was going to go uploaded into get uploaded into the computer. Maybe I cease to exist, and now there's just you one and you two, and you dead doesn't exist anymore, right? Or you might deny that the self is physical. The self doesn't depend on um, the brain and the memories that are encoded within the brain, but rather um, the self is really some kind of collection of well, it could be a matter of properties, or it could be a matter of I don't know, like a soul or something. Um, Maybe there's no problem with you two with you continuing to exist, and then you one and you two, or what am I saying? Maybe it does make sense in some way to say that you exist in both of the copies at the same time. Well, that's just a possibility we can imagine. Yeah, I haven't played Cyberpunk, but engram is a word that refers to how memories are encoded in the brain. That's pretty cool. But yeah, Quinn's question, the question of whether copying kills, that actually depends on who you ask, right? Um, but you see why this is kind of confusing, right? Either you ceases to exist, or you is you one or you two or both. It's very confusing. Yeah. Yeah, he's just saying this is absurd. And this is why, because it's so confusing. Like if we go with the memory criterion, then okay, but what happens if I'm duplicated? The fission problems um highlight the issues with the memory criterion. So that's why some opt for a body criterion instead to explain personal numerical identity. So the body criterion says if I have the same body, I am the same person. And this helps address both persistence questions and individuation questions. So, what is it that makes me the same individual now that I was a few years ago? I inhabit the same body. What makes me a different individual from you? Different bodies. Easy. But bodies change over time. So it doesn't just mean the material I'm made of. There's a sort of body history, right? Like, again, the ship of Theseus. How is it the same ship if all the parts have been replaced? Well, maybe it's the sort of continued history of the ship, not the parts that it's made of. Well, the body criterion would say, sure, it's the same ship if it has the same history, body history, right? And even the human body obviously changes. Um, I'm not made of I'm not made of all of the exact same molecules that I was a decade ago or 2 decades ago. When I was 5 years old, I was short. Now I'm tall, right? But I'm the same person because the body that I have now has a history that I can trace back to the body that 5-year-old me had. And this is really helpful for individuating different people. Um, I'm me because this is the body that I have, and you're you because you have the body that you have. Um, and again, it helps us answer the persistence question. So I am the same person that I am now as I was in the past because this body persists and it has a history. No, I wouldn't say it's an argument against physicalism because we're talking about the physical body. Like what makes me the person I am is the body that I have. So it's actually pretty physical if you think about it. Um, Interesting question. I mean, some people might say that that is significant enough to make you a different person, but I think that the body criterion people would say that as long as there's a sort of, in the same way that Locke proposed, there's got to be this chain of remembered experiences. If there's a chain of moments, um, or a sort of history, a historical chain of events to do with the body, then you're the same person. So if you undergo a transplant, um, and you get, I don't know, like a new kidney, um, we can still trace that. It's like, okay, you have a new kidney now, but we can trace that back, and see that you underwent surgery and previously you had a different kidney. And again, it's like the ship of Theseus, right? Like, okay, this is a different piece of wood that I'm standing on the ship now, but it's the history of the ship that matters, not what it's made of. What about Darth Vader? Um, yeah. Well, that's different because I mean, we might be talking about two different individuals there. There's Anakin Skywalker and there's Darth Vader, right? Oh, you're talking about Anakin like when he's just been made a Sith and then he fights Obi-Wan. Well, I would say that during that point, the transformation is not yet complete. That's what I would say. I don't think he's fully Darth Vader until the mask is put on and he takes his first breath. That's why George Lucas made sure that we could see that little puff of smoke moving away from the mask as he takes his first breath. No, breath is associated with life. So taking that first breath in the suit is kind of and when he's on the table and he gets up, that also harkens back to Frankenstein's monster. It's alive. So I don't think he's fully Vader until that moment, but that's me. But yeah, uh yeah, like Christine said, a train of events. That's correct. Oh, weird. I didn't know that, Kale. That changes my that changes my outlook on kidney transplants. But of course, I guess there's some organs that are so big they'd have to remove, like if you needed a new liver, right? The liver is quite a large organ, so I imagine they would take that out. But yeah, kidneys are smaller, so I guess yeah, leave it in, right? All right, so here's the issue. Identity implies sameness, right? Like, remember the idea of qualitative identity, where uh I'm the same if I have the same qualities as I'm the same me as I have now if I had the same qualities as me in past, say, both psychologically and bodily. But how can I be the same person if, for example, my body has changed? Well, maybe we can apply appeal to our bodily histories. Maybe it's only a particular part of the body that matters, though, like the brain. Maybe the brain is what really matters. I could lose a limb or an organ and, still be the same person, sure. But what if I lost, what if I lost some important memories? What if, like Locke said, you need this sort of causal chain? What if that chain of memories is completely broken? Again, think of like an Alzheimer's patient. Yeah, I actually haven't seen RoboCop. I don't really know. I know that he is a robot who's also a cop. But oh my goodness, sorry. Ugh. It's cold and flu season. I don't feel sick, but I've got some kind of congestion going on. Um, so yeah, maybe the brain is what matters. You could imagine a sort of brain in the vat situation after all, right? Um, Imagine something happens to your body. So a mad scientist keeps your brain alive. He keeps it in a little vat, feeds it nutrients, like a bit like the heads on Futurama, right? I think someone mentioned that in a previous lecture. This is Hillary Putnam's brain in the vat thought experiment. Now, if I take your brain and put it in the vat, and your consciousness continued, and you still had all of your important thoughts and beliefs and memories, then we could argue that you continue to exist. Um, so it's the part of the body. It's similar to the body view, but it's a particular part of the body that matters, which is the brain. So as long as your brain continues to exist, you continue to exist. But it's also similar to the psychological view because on this assumption, um, the brain is kind of like the mind is what the brain does, and the mind includes all of your memories and thoughts and perceptions and so forth. So as long as that mental life continues on because the brain continues on, then you continue to exist. All right, looks like we have to go to the next set of slides. What do we think so far? Well, these are yeah, cases of dissociative identity disorder are kind of weird. Um, so it's not clear whether dissociative identity disorder actually represents multiple persons in one mind, or a sort of self that's been fragmented. I mean, there's considerable debate over whether it even is a psychiatric disorder and not related to something else like fugue states. Um, so as I said last time, I think I mentioned this, or I might have been my other class because we're also talking about identity in my other class. But There's a thinker named Jennifer Radin who has a very interesting chapter on this question in the Oxford Handbook of the Self. So if you're curious, I would check that out. Yeah, and well, I agree, Remy, if indeed we can upload our minds to computers, it might not be the kind of thing we can do. Yeah, Brady, that's true. Dr. McCoy, famously from the original series, did not like the transporter. Okay. Um, yeah, Derek Parfit has a scenario um, that's quite like, or that involves a device that's quite similar to the transporter from Star Trek. So what it does is it takes you apart, basically takes your matter, turns it to energy, beams it across space, and then turns it back into matter and reassembles you. Um, so you could take it to Mars. You could step into the transporter. Imagine I had some kind of Star Trekky sort of transporter um, here in my living room, and I invited you over, and I said I could beam you to Mars for a little look around the planet, right? Would you go? Who would take the transporter? Karen says no. Cooper says no. Quinn would. Christine, no. Remy wouldn't. Carr wouldn't. Okay. That's fair. Yeah, that's the worry, right, Quinn? Am I the same person when I rematerialize on the other end? Am I the same person? And for the people that wouldn't take it, that's the worry, right? So, yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Parfit, not to get ahead of myself, but Parfit would say it doesn't matter. Like, does the transporter take you apart and put you back together, or does it just kill you and make a copy of you? Doesn't matter. There's someone on the other end of that transporter with all of your memories, with your body, who is basically you. It doesn't matter. It's a meaningless question. What matters is somebody rematerializes and we can treat that somebody as you. Yeah, maybe you wouldn't come back to the same. Maybe there'd be some loss of molecules or something. Um, right? If you think that it kills you and makes a copy of you, I get it. The transporter doesn't always work, at least on Star Trek, right? We already mentioned, well, what would happen to your consciousness? I don't know. What if consciousness is non-physical? So the transporter makes a copy of you, but uh, it's only your body. So whatever comes out on the other side is some kind of mindless zombie because the soul became detached, right? Yeah. So, yeah, we already mentioned second chances. This is Riker right here, pre-Beard, um, where Riker the Enterprise is going around in space, and they get some distress call from some planet where, um, yeah, well, that's like another Rick and Morty episode. That's like the Night People one. But anyway, yeah, so this is from years ago. The Enterprise is going around in space and they pick up a distress call and they go and check it out. And it's another Riker. And it turns out years ago, he had been beamed down to that planet to, I don't know, do some kind of away mission. And then when they were beaming him back up, something went wrong where Part of the transporter beam made it to the ship and part got reflected back because of some kind of atmospheric interference. So one Riker went down and then two were beamed up, but one didn't make it back to the Enterprise or wherever, whatever ship he was on. And eventually that Riker does adopt a new sort of persona. The one that was on the Enterprise remains William Riker, and the one that was on the planet starts using his middle name to sort of individuate himself. And it's kind of a funny episode because they hate each other. Um, right? They just can't stand one another. I always thought that was funny. Or back in the day, the original series, there's this one episode called "The Enemy Within" where they duplicate Kirk, but there's sort of like different personality traits in each Captain Kirk. So there's like a good Kirk and an evil Kirk. So that's kind of cool. And then of course there's Tuvix. So I don't know if any of you have seen Star Trek Voyager, but the episode Tuvix is pretty insane. Um, where the security officer Tuvok and the cook Neelix, who also kind of they try and get along, but they're different. Tuvok is the straight serious guy, and Neelix is kind of silly and annoying, and they get merged into a single entity called Tuvix. Yeah. And so what happens to Tuvix? Well, murder? I don't know. Yeah, Captain Janeway says, okay, they figure out a way to split Tuvix back up into Tuvok and Neelix. And Tuvix like begs for his life, and they do it anyway. So I guess they kill Tuvix to save Neelix and Tuvok. Yeah. So, yeah, do you want to take the transporter to Mars? If you don't want to, I get it. Quinn says still yes. Yeah. You say that now, but maybe you get merged with the person on the who takes the trip with you. Now you're a Tuvix, and we're going to have to kill you to get you back apart. Split brains are also really interesting. Yeah, maybe when there's not much left to lose, right? Then take the transporter. Or wait until the kinks have been worked out, right? Like um split brains. Back in the day, if you had very, very severe epileptic seizures, one of the treatments that we could do um, would be to sever the corpus callosum and the anterior commissure. So these are big bundles of nerves that join the two cerebral hemispheres, the two hemispheres of your brain, as you can see pictured here. So these are the two cerebral hemispheres, and you can't see the corpus callosum, but it would be deep in the brain, down the like somewhere down the midline here. Now, the really weird thing, it's funny, I was talking about this in my other course this week as well, is that we found that these two brain halves, even though they couldn't really communicate with one another, could function somewhat independently. So, for example, the brain is organized contralaterally when it comes to vision and a few other things, but that means that information from the right side of space is processed in my left visual cortex, and information from the left side of space is processed in my right visual cortex. So that has some interesting implications for split brain patients. Now, in most people, the part of the brain that's implicated in speech output, Broca's area, is on the left-hand side. So, let's say you cut my corpus callosum. Now my two hemispheres can't communicate with one another. You show a coffee cup in my right side of space. I see it goes through my optic nerves uh, to the left visual center. And luckily, Broca's area is also on the left. So I would be able to say, oh, that's a coffee cup. If you ask me what it is, coffee cup, no problem. Put it over here. Now it's on the left side of space. And the visual input from the coffee cup is being processed on the right visual cortex. But now, because my corpus callosum is cut, that information can't get over to the left hemisphere where my language centers are. So if you show me a coffee cup in that side of space, I wouldn't be able to tell you what it is. But here's the weird part. What I would be able to do is reach out and choose among a pile of objects another coffee cup. Really weird. So it's like the two hemispheres are kind of operating independently. Some even go so far as to say that it's like there are two different brains in one head. Yeah, it's pretty neat. Yeah, we take for granted a normally operating brain, but if you had to have your corpus callosum severed, um, you would you would have like things like visual agnosias, where if you showed me the coffee cup in my left field of view, I wouldn't be able to name the object. Yeah, kind of. But it's not like a hard and fast rule. In most right-handed people, the speech centers are like the Broca's area is on the left-hand side, but not in everyone. And there's this whole kind of myth around whether people are left-brained or right-brained, and I mean, most of us, if our language centers are on the left-hand side, are arguably left-brained. But yeah, it's not quite like handedness, right? The people sometimes, I still see them like on my, from scrolling through social media or something. I see these little stupid quizzes that pop up like, are you left-brained or right-brained? Are you an artist or a mathematician, and it's like that's not how it works, right? But yeah, like the hemispheres are specialized for different things. The right hemisphere is better at face processing. The left is the languagey one, right? So, okay, so now another kind of duplication problem. Imagine that your body's dying. Not only that, half your brain is also dying. But we could take the living half of your brain and put it in a clone body. Are you the same person? Yeah, the Myers-Briggs. Yes, I do. I do not agree with the Myers-Briggs personality types. Um, it's just, I mean, there's not very much good evidence for the idea that there are stable personality types, whether it's the Myers-Briggs or um, something else like the Big Five. Um, which is kind of interesting for our purposes, right? If you say like I have this personality trait and that's one of the things that's essential to who you are, well, that might change. And if that changes, then are you still you? So yeah, let's say your body and one half of your brain is dying, but we can save you by taking the living half of your brain and putting it in a clone body. Would you would you do it? Would you still think that you're the same person? Yeah, we can do a hemispherectomy. That's right. But when we do a hemispherectomy, we take out one hemisphere and get rid of it, right? Yeah, the same but in reverse. So, what if you had to do a a version of this where you had to take your surviving half of your brain and put it in a new body? Would that person be the same person? Okay, Quinn says I'd be a different person. That's fair. So maybe Quinn, maybe like here if you're subscribing to the same brain view, so if I have the same brain, then I'm the same person, then sure, I'm the same person in the new body. But maybe you're not. Maybe your intuition is leading you in a different direction. Maybe you're not the same. Maybe it's not the same brain. Yeah, would you keep all of your memories, right? Like what if you lose some of your memories because you only have half a brain, right? Yeah, you mentioned behavior, Remy, so maybe it's same brain, same body. Maybe you need both to be the same, and because it's a clone body, it's similar enough that you have the same brain and same body. So your behavior and everything would continue on the same. What about a different scenario where we have a patient and the body is dying, but we can create two copies? So we can create, like in the U1, U2 case where we were going to upload someone's mind to a computer. Um, if we were to put both of those copies in the same if we were to take each copy, like if I could copy the surviving hemisphere and put each of them in a new body, do I have one person in two bodies or two new people? Right? It's another fission case, right? Maybe our original ceases to exist, and now I have like U1 and U2, and U just ceases to exist. Or perhaps, like we were saying earlier, um, U2, U1 or U2, one of them is identical to you, but we just can't say which one. What do you think? Personally, I think uh, that we've got two new people. But then that raises the question, when it comes to real life split brain patients, are there two people in one body? Right? If I sever your corpus callosum so that now you have two cerebral hemispheres that operate largely independently from one another, does that mean that there are two people in one head? Let's say we did it clean and we grew them in a lab, like in a tank of nutrients, and they're brainless, so we can put the halves of the brains in them. Right, Remy? Yeah. And that's why Crumley gives us a nice overview of different kinds of identity at the beginning of the chapter. Like, what does it mean to be the same person? Um, Either in the past or like in the future versus the past, or before you step into the transporter and after you step into the transporter, or before or after uploading your brain to a computer or having your brain transplanted into a new body. Well, it depends what we mean by identity and sameness, right? I think we might actually be able to finish these slides today, although I don't want to rush. Yeah, that's true. But maybe you are the same in another sense because there is that kind of history, right? There's the chain of memories and there's the history of your body, right? The continuity. Yeah. Well, maybe we can just think of persons as souls, right? I mean, um that's Plato's view, one of the oldest views. What makes you you is your soul, your psyche. Yeah. Yeah, like Plato said that persons are their souls. Souls are incorporeal, immortal, divine, and they survive the death of the body. The body is corporeal, corruptible. And incidentally, Plato believed in something like what we would call reincarnation. He called it the transmigration of the soul. So, the soul, when the body dies, the soul goes off and encounters the pure forms, the things in themselves. And eventually it will get re-embodied, but because of the trauma of birth, we forget this knowledge of the forms, but we can recollect it by doing philosophy. Um, so if you're curious about that, read Plato's dialogue Phaedo. That's the one where Socrates is about to be executed and his friends are really sad and Socrates says, "Don't worry. Either I'll just be dead or I'll be continuing on and I'll be able to do philosophy in the afterlife essentially and know the pure forms directly. I'll have the contact with the purest form of knowledge." And he gives like four arguments to try to convince his friends of the immortality of the soul. So that's a fun one. Um, and by the way, this view is this is inherited by early Christian Neoplatonic philosophers like Saint Augustine. Saint Augustine was a Christian, but he was also a Neoplatonic philosopher. So the idea that the soul survives the death of the body kind of makes its way into Christianity from Greek philosophy, which is kind of cool. Um, in a lot of traditions, including early Judaism, um, for again Christianity emerging as a religion from Judaism, in a lot of traditions like that, you're just dead, right? You die, and you're dead, and you go to the underworld, and you're just kind of there in the underworld, and you're dead, and you do all the same stuff that you did when you were alive. You just do it while you're dead. And it's like the whole you is there. Maybe you're like a shade in Tartarus, because the Greeks have the underworld is Tartarus, and you go there as a shade, and you just kind of hang out. Um, so that's an interesting little factoid. Aristotle, of course, Plato's most famous student, disagreed with this view. Aristotle thought of the soul as the organizing principle of a living being. So I don't want to get ahead of myself, but Aristotle is where we get those hylomorphic views from. Remember, for something to be, just to be, you need form and matter. Now, Plato thought that the perfect forms, were like the most real thing. So the form of the triangle is more perfect, more real than any triangle that we could draw on the chalkboard, in the sand, wherever, right? But Aristotle said, well, that's silly. Without matter, form is just nothing. You need matter so that the form has something to give form to. And the matter needs the form to be what it is. And for living beings, the soul is the form. The soul is the form of a living, organized body. It's not something immaterial or magical or divine. It's just how all of this works. So, but each of these thinkers thought of the soul as being divisible. So Plato has divided the soul into three parts. You have an appetitive soul, which that's your drives, your appetites, like the need for sleep or hunger or thirst, right? That's your appetitive soul. Then you have your spirited soul. Um, that's where the emotions are, the passions, where pain and pleasure are. Then you have your rational soul, which is what enables us to think and to talk. Aristotle also makes a division similar to this, but it's not exactly the same. Everything that is alive has, again, some organizing principle that organizes the matter into a living form. And for Aristotle, the most basic organizing principle that everything needs to have is a nutritive soul. That is what is responsible for growth, consuming food and water, reproducing, right? And all living things have a nutritive soul, Aristotle said. Plants, for example, only have the nutritive soul and nothing else. But another part of soul, or another part of this organizing principle, is the sensitive soul, which allows an organism to sense its environment and to move around within it. So animals have the nutritive soul and the sensitive soul, but plants only have the nutritive soul. And then, of course, the essential feature of the human being, what makes us special, is the rational soul. And this is what makes human beings human. The fact that we have reason. So that's how Aristotle divides up the soul. I don't really want to get, well, I mean, I guess I can, we've got a couple minutes. Um, we call Aristotle's theory hylomorphism, from hule, matter, and morphe, form. As I said before, um, individuals are primary substances. Like I am a primary substance, you're a primary substance, and we are such because we are matter arranged according to this organizing principle. And that organizing principle is what Aristotle thinks of as the soul. So plants have soul, they have nutritive souls, animals have nutritive and sensitive souls, and humans have all three. Anything that's alive needs to have this organizing principle, but it's not magic, it's not divine, it's not a ghost in the machine or some kind of soul that will go off and meet with the pure forms. It's just how everything is put together and how it all works. Okay, we better leave it there for today. So next week we'll finish off these slides, and then we will talk about freedom of the will, which ought to be fun. Don't forget, your essays are due tomorrow. Do not forget to submit proof of student work. Again, a couple of early drafts. Just submit that with your final draft. Yeah, well, I mean, I probably wouldn't tell them there is a Santa. I would just not. I just wouldn't. Yeah, incomplete drafts. Yes. Yes, like send me just like two earlier drafts and a final draft. Well, you could Cooper, like it's not essential, but they're like sometimes we do things called acknowledgments where we thank people. So you could acknowledge, like, if, hey, my other student, Sally McStudent Face, read my paper. I would like to thank Sally for that. And you can do that with a footnote, right? Um, well, I have to run to the campus. So sorry. It just when I get another direct message, email me if you have a question because I have to get ready to run to campus like now to scoot up there for my next class. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and I will see you all next week. And take care, everyone. I hope you have a good weekend. Hey, we're almost at the end of the term. After this week is over, 2 more weeks, and then we're into the exam period. So hang in there, everyone. All right, bye for now.